Okay, welcome to lesson 3.6. We are talking about estimating lengths. So we have different, what we call referents. So a referent is when we take an object or part of our body that we use that can symbolize the length of an object. So for example, we use parts of our body as an example as a personal referent. That's why it's called personal referent. So it says it can be the length of a distance, it can be metric or imperial. So it says 1 centimeter is about the width of your pinky finger. So from side to side, the width all the way across is about 1 centimeter. Then it says a foot, like an actual foot, is a little bit longer than your real foot. Now, there's also one that we could do this way. 1 inch equals the width of 2 fingers. Okay, doesn't matter which 2 fingers. If you put them up like this and measure the width of them, it should be about an inch, approximately an inch. Okay. Then it says a foot's a little bit longer if you wanted to check a different type of object. So if you've got an object with you, what type of object could be looking like it? So if I said an inch, well, we already said this one. This is the width of 2 fingers. Doesn't matter which fingers. 1 foot. Well, that's about the normal size of your own foot or the length between your elbow and wrist. Your elbow and wrist. That is the length of a foot. So from about here to here, that's about the length of a foot. We always think of Subway for the foot-long sandwiches, right? So the Subway sandwiches, those are a foot long. Then we go to yards. A yard is about the length of 1 large stride. Okay, so a stride is like, I can't do it very well with my leg right now, but a stride would be like doing something like this, reaching forward like a big stride, okay? Like not just doing, oh, I'm walking, here's a step. A stride is actually doing like a big, whoa, there's a big stride, okay? I can't do it right now. But that would be like a stride where you're really walking with big, long steps. I think should demonstrate. Who? No, nobody's demonstrating. Now, we could also think of the floor, or the floor to your hip. Now, this goes on the average of about a 5 foot 7 or 8 person. So normally, nowadays, people are a lot shorter than they used to be. So right now, if I had a meter stick beside me, from the floor to my hip is right here, it would be a little bit taller because I'm short. Now, some of you tall guys like Ty and Kai and Cameron, Ethan and Nathan back there, you tall people, it's going to be lower on your leg, okay, because you're quite tall. But that's typically the length of what you would see for a meter stick. So a yardstick is about the same thing as a meter stick. So you know how in Romeo and Juliet, you get those big long ruler sticks and you do those sword fights in LA class, if you've ever done that? Well, those yardsticks and meter sticks, they're the same length, okay? That's what they're called. But a referent is part of your body. So if I have nothing to measure with, I might say, okay, well, I need to measure 4 centimeters. Well, 4 centimeters, my width of my pinky is 1 centimeter. So if I wanted 4 of them, I would just measure 1, 2, 3, 4, and I would measure 4 of these going across, okay? If I needed 4 inches, I would go like this 4 times, and that's going to give me 4 inches, okay? Roughly. All right. Now, how could we use, what would be the most appropriate unit to measure these in? So what this is trying to do is to see if you understand the size of the units. So if I were to tell you metric, so kilometer is the largest unit, okay? Whereas we have millimeter is the smallest unit, okay? That's for metric. Now, if we've got imperial, The smallest unit for our imperial is an inch, and the largest is a mile. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to roughly identify what size would I measure it in. So if it's called a golf ball, if you're looking at a golf ball, those golf balls are pretty little. So diameter means all the way across it. So if you're going all the way across it, you're probably only going to need 2 fingers or 4 fingers. Okay. So what would be the best thing to measure it in? Inches and centimeters. Those would be the most appropriate units. So you would write inch and then centimeter. So what about now distance for driving? What about Calgary to Regina? Regina's in Saskatchewan. Or what if I said Red Deer or Sylvan Lake to Vancouver? Would I measure that in the smallest unit, millimeters, or would I measure it in kilometers? What do you think? Kilometers, because it's a distance for driving, right? So this one would be kilometers. And what's the large distance on the other one? What is the large distance on the other one? Miles. Okay, miles is the largest, inches is the smallest. So here we would have MI for miles. All right, the thickness of a DVD. Well, if DVD is about this thick, right? It's like paper thin. So we would say millimeters. We could even measure centimeters, but millimeters would be more accurate. And the smallest one on the other ones is an inch. So that's why we've got 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch, because if an inch is this big, you've got to have a lot of little lines in between so you can count all those little spaces. Okay? The height of a tree. So what would be the most logic thing to measure the height of a tree? Feet, excellent. Okay, feet. And then what about in metric? So meters, excellent. So M for meters. So M equals meters. That's the difference between MI, because MI is miles, which measures distance. All right, the thickness of a book. What would you measure the thickness of a book in? A centimeter, yeah. And on the left, what's the smallest one? What's on the left? Inches. Inches is the smallest over here. So you have no choice. The smallest one over there is an inch. But remember, if you've got an inch, let's just pretend if that's an inch from 0 to 1 inches, inches are divided into 8. So that means I would have, in the middle would be half of an inch. And then we would have other steps to get to the inches. So it takes 8 steps. And then you can divide that even smaller into 16. You can divide those smaller into 16th and 30 seconds. That's when you're getting more into detail. If you're an artist, maybe even a tattooist, or if you're going to be construction, that's when you need to be able to measure accurately in those 16ths. All right, turn your page. Right now we've got roughly, oh, it's froze on us again. Hang on. You're going to let me touch it? Yeah, okay. Got to freeze. We are stopping. I'm glad. Yes, I'll update the attendance. Thank you.
I was walking and then, yeah.
Okay, there's the update. So this is what I was talking about with inches. So here you would have in the middle, this would be 0.5 of an inch, or we would say 4 out of 8, because inches is measured out of 8. Okay, so that would be 4 out of 8. That's half an inch. Okay, because remember, there's 8 steps to get there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 steps. Okay, does everybody got that one written down? All right, let's go to the next page, please. On the top of the next page, we have a American $50 bill. So I've got the dimensions on there in inches and in centimeters. So roughly, if I were to measure inches, now inches is the width of 2 fingers. I want you to take 2 fingers and roughly measure how far across. How many of them would you need for inches? So how long would that guy be if you measure with 2 fingers going all the way across? How wide do you think this is from here to here? How many inches? What do you think? Yeah, exactly right. So this is about 6 inches. So the length 6 inches. IN is inches. All right, the width, that's up and down. So how many of these can you go up and down with? Exactly. So this guy's going to be 3 inches. So he's a 6 by $3 bill. Okay, that's what's actually going on. All right, now this is all measuring without an actual measuring stick or a ruler. So that's why we're using reference. That's why on this one, I would not pull out a ruler. That's why I said use your fingers to measure them and see what you would get for an answer. Okay, this whole lesson 6 is all about reference. Okay, trying to decide, is it logical? Is a kilometer logical to use to measure the length of a door? Okay, those types of things. Would I use a kilometer to measure the length of that dollar bill? No, a kilometer is way too big. It measures distances that we travel and drive. So that means you have to use the smallest unit. So the smallest unit on this one for the imperial is the inch. That's why we had to use inches. So what do we say inches were? Width of 2 fingers. Okay. All right, now we're going to circle the best estimate. And again, we're thinking logically, which unit makes more sense? Would they measure that in that unit or not? So if I said the height of that classroom door there, am I going to measure it in yards or feet? Which one makes more sense to measure it in yards or feet for that door? What do you think? Feet. Now, why would you say feet?
Yards is more like distance.
Yeah, yards can be distance.
Especially like football or something.
Exactly. It's a larger, okay? So yards is a larger unit, okay? So if it's a larger unit, we usually use those larger units for exactly like Cameron said, distances between things, not lengths of doors or windows. If we're staying with lengths of doors and windows and things like that, we would be inches and feet, okay? So you go to the smaller unit. On B, the length of a pen. So now we're in a small unit again. Which one makes more sense? Inches or yards again? Inches, exactly. So you got to think about which one makes more sense. Okay, that's why you have to think of these. And you're going to get questions on your quizzes. And you have to ask yourself, which makes the most sense? So most of math is about sense making. Does it make sense to you? Does it actually equate in your brain that, oh yeah, I figured that out. That actually, I can get with that. That makes sense. Okay, that's what we're looking for. Take a look at the length of your nose. Now, some of us have longer noses than others, but which would be the appropriate unit to measure them in? Am I going to use a meter? Remember, a meter is like that yardstick. A meter would be like that long. Am I going to use a meter or a centimeter? Centimeter. Good. Again, this is when things make sense, we call that logic. Okay? Logical thinking. A lot of you that are gamers, you do a lot of this when you're gaming because there's lots of different things coming at you and you have to logically make sense of what is the next strategy. So a lot of this sense making, you guys do it without even knowing you're doing it. Okay, don't pay attention to those guys. You pay attention up here. No distracting. Okay. The height of a 30-story building. 30-story building. Now we're talking the height of a building. Which one makes more sense, feet or those meter sticks? Feet. Feet is actually the better one.
Isn't 300 meters, wouldn't 300 meters be more than feet though?
It is. Yeah, because remember, 1 meter is equal to about 1 yard.
Yeah. So
So feet would be more, when we measure out when we measure out rooms and distances to do things, it's actually in feet. Yeah, you were more correct with the yards thinking football because that's larger distances. Yeah, or you would also use that if you were thinking something like farming where you have to, and you'd use even a bigger unit. You'd use hectares when you're talking about the size of an area of a field. All right, diameter of a CD. So that means taking something round and going all the way across. Well, CD is about like this. How would I measure all the way across that? Which one makes more sense? Centimeters or the tiniest millimeters? Which one makes more sense? It's centimeters. How come? Millimeters is too small. If you think about it, this is a centimeter ruler. It takes 30 centimeters to make this ruler. If you go to millimeters, it takes 300 millimeters to make this ruler. So if I'm looking at going across something that is about this wide, if I want to measure something this wide, am I going to measure in centimeters or in millimeters? This wide would give me about 15 centimeters. Okay? 10 to 15 centimeters. Well, am I going to look at 100 millimeters or 150 millimeters? No, we got to think about accuracy as well. Logic and accuracy. All right, last example. Now we're actually going to estimate. Okay? We're going to estimate the length of these things. Imperial. So this is inches, yards, feet, and miles. Okay? So miles, inches, yards, feet. This one is your millimeters to kilometers. Okay? So the height of a cat, about that high. So what are we talking? Or even to the top of its head. 5'4", nice. So how high would we consider that? If you had a Subway foot-long sub, would that vertically measure that high about? If you put a vertical foot-long sub right there, is that about that high?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you could say that would be about 1 foot.
Where were you writing it?
Oh, it froze again. Okay, just a sec. All right, we'll get this to stop again. Hang on. Yes. Okay, there we go. So 1 foot. And now metric. What would be the same in metric? So feet, if I wanted to measure 1 foot, 1 foot is a little bit larger than this. It's about 45 to 50 centimeters. So measuring in centimeters or in millimeters, which one makes more sense for the height of a cat? Centimeters or millimeters? So remember, right now, the height of this is 30 centimeters or 300 millimeters. So centimeters makes more sense. Good. So we would say approximately 30 to 50 centimeters. Okay, depending on if it's a kitten or if it, and that's like from their feet to the top of their head. Okay, the diameter of a pop can. So we take our pop can and we measure the top of it all the way across, or the bottom, we measure the cross. How far across is it? It's 2 inches. So we would say 2 inches. Okay, well, 2 inches, if I wanted to measure 2 inches, all you got to do is you can flip this guy over. How big is 2 inches? Well, 2 inches is about 5 centimeters. So 5 to 6 centimeters. Okay. How about those long orange cheese wagons? How long do you think one of those is? Like the, sorry, I call them a cheese wagon. It's a school bus. When I went to school, we called them cheese wagons. So all the school buses that you see out there, we called them cheese wagons because it was like a big block of cheese going by. I don't know. I know, that's back in the day. It's an old back in the day funny for you. All right, so the length of a school bus. So what makes most sense? How long do you think they are? We're not going to measure in yards. Remember, yards is like football fields. We would measure in feet, but how many feet long do you think they are? So our little white one out there, the little white one, I'll give you an example. The little white one is probably 20 feet, 18 to 20 feet. So how big do you think the big one is? 36 to 40, yes. So about 36 to 40 feet. Okay, that's the large school buses. Okay, the regular large ones. Whoa, that's supposed to say large. Okay. Oh, it's doing it again. Okay. Who's throwing things?
People. I had a pencil thrown at me.
So it says the length of a football field. So now we're measuring large distances. So now which one is the most appropriate? We know football fields are how long? 100 yards in Canada, you bet.
Technically, it's like Canadian, it's 120, but
Is it 120 or 110?
110 or 120.
It's 110.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's 100 in America, right? Yeah, and 110 in Canada, for Canada, right? Yeah, that's Canada. CA is Canada. Okay, so that's yards. Okay, so 110 yards. Now we want to talk about, if we're talking yards, and remember, oh, go, if you're going to pee your pants. Okay, now, remember I talked to you about a yardstick, and I said it's usually going up to your hip, but I'm short, so it's usually going to go up to here. So a yardstick is the same as a meter stick. So if you're measuring in yards and meters, they'd be about the same. So if I wanted to measure this guy, I would do the same thing, only I would say it's meters. So Nick, where are you going, buddy?
Appointment.
You have an appointment? Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry. No, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure you just wasn't piecing out. Okay, sounds good. So this is going to be about 90 to 100 meters. Okay, so the meters are different. It's about 90 to 100 meters. Okay, is it going to come up there or did it freeze? I think it froze. Darn it. Now we're talking about the basketball hoop, but we're talking about from the floor to the height of the basketball hoop. So how would we measure that? If you're going to jump the basket into a hoop, how tall are those hoops? Yeah, exactly. So we would say these guys are 10 feet, 10 FT. Okay, that's glitching a little bit. I need to erase that. It should be a 10. Okay. Now, feet is going to be the same as we talked about with meters, only it's going to be 3 times less in meters. So what's the closest number to 10 that will divide by 9? I mean, divide by 3. 9. I gave you the answer. So it's about 9 meters. Gotta love when your teacher gives you the answer right away. Okay, this concludes estimating in imperial and metric.